Is it working now? Is that working? I think that's working now. Yeah, how's that? Technical difficulties, eh? So we should be right now. So guys, I'll start again anyway. Yeah, so welcome. And another technical difficulty. Actually, as we're evolving, it's getting better and better, but no, God. So today we're gonna look at the special relationship, and effectively how the Trump or Biden will impact the property market and you as a property investor. Because I think that's really important right now. Actually, it doesn't really matter who's in the White House. Both candidates are relatively the same. It's the big corporates which they look after. So we'll talk more about that. We're gonna look at the second lockdown impact on property, and we'll see what that impact will be or what it's likely to be, okay? Unemployment, will it stop growth, okay? And what's the likely outcome of that? And then we're gonna look at, are we a nation or are we becoming a nation of renters just like Europe, okay? Are we moving in that direction? And what can you as a property investor do about it to make sure that you don't fall into that renter class? And then race to space, is it real? All these people talking about how everyone's flooding out of the cities and buying places out thing. Is that everybody? And then why property funds are dead. Yeah, we've heard it many times before about buy to let is dead. Are property funds now dead? Are they copying it? So we'll have a look at that. So that's what we've got planned for today. And by the way, guys, any questions you've got, we've got you're going Facebook or YouTube. And yeah, just send your questions through and I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. So let's get into it. So before we get started, make sure if you're first time here, make sure you press subscribe, and I'd really love it and it would help me out greatly if you press that like button. We're obviously building the channel and we're playing with these, this lovely algorithm thing, which they don't really tell you what it is, but we do know that if you press the like button and you subscribe, then that'll get you access to this every week and get you a reminder and things like that. And it helps me out grow the channel, which is what I'm really keen to do. And also it helps the team out too that are behind me. And unfortunately, right now, because I'm in Singapore, technically I'm running more technical, and so that's why we're having a few technical difficulties, but all good. So, excellent. So let's move on. So it's a close race, a very close race. So 238 to 213 overnight. So pretty much the counting stopped for them. Well, I imagine they're still counting, but they're not announcing the things. But as you can see there, popular vote, 50% Biden, 48, but that means nothing. As we've seen before, the popular vote means nothing to the actual election. What actually matters is how many seats they get, okay? And if you win a state, you get all of the seats, okay? And that's the system that works. It's close, and it's really too close to call right now. Trump's looking good, but by the same token, Biden, the mail-in, would have had preference for Biden. So it could be that these mail-ins, which are going to take a lot of time, and for instance, Pennsylvania, 1.5 million votes to be counted from the mail-in, which could totally turn around that. So we'll see what happens in that. Either way, I think the important thing for us as property investors in the UK and around the world is, first of all, I think we can have a bit of a giggle if Trump gets back in, because it is a bit interesting that someone with no moral compass and no, it shows you the state of politics, and surely something has to give, realistically. But then you look at the alternative, I'm not that impressed with the alternative either, which is Biden, So yeah, interesting. All right, so let's talk about the special relationship. So a special relationship or back of the queue. So that's what's been threatened, obviously, because if we don't do Brexit right, then obviously, and Biden gets in, the likelihood is we go to the back of the queue. Otherwise, if Trump stays in, we're likely to have a special relationship. And let's face it, Trump doesn't have too many friends. So, if we be friends with him, we can probably benefit from that greatly, because they are still the largest economy in the world. Okay, so it's all fun and games to have a bit of a laugh and say how silly they are and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, they are the largest economy, and they still are the largest economy. And I think that's the important bit here. So we need it. We want to get a trade deal with them, because we do trade with them quite a bit. Nowhere near as much as we do with Europe. So Europe should be our first thing. But obviously, I've spoken about my Brexit thoughts and whether we'll get a deal or not, which obviously I think we will. It'll be the last hour of the last day of the last minute. But I think that's coming. We'll see how about that. Look, I think with this whole special relationship, I don't think it's going to go away. Trump, as much as he is going to push people away if he gets in, because this is the problem right now. We don't know who's in. I was hoping to have an outcome, but basically if Trump gets in, I think that's good for us. If Biden gets in, that depends. I don't think Biden's going to totally write us off. I think actually there is a relationship there, although he is Irish, of Irish descent. So if we screw around with the Good Friday Agreement and things like that, you may find that, we don't get the preference that we have had in a special relationship comes to an end. And let's face it, it hasn't really been a special relationship this term either, but then he's not been in a special relationship with anyone, So let's look, the main things that I've found, and I stole these off, actually I didn't put where it was from, but anyway, look, waiting for a trade deal. I mean, the reality is we're not going to get a trade deal with the US. They've said, that we can move to the front of the queue and it'll be a great trade deal if Trump gets in. We'll move to the back of the queue if Biden gets in, but it's not going to be until after January because we are going to be negotiating with the EU and that's our priority, and it has to be our priority to be fair. One of the other things, chlorinated chickens, this is one of the things they're talking about, which is, the fact that they chlorinate their chickens to kill all the, bugs and things like that, which we don't do. We're under EU law, we could relax that. Price of medication, they want to get access to the NHS where they dictate the terms. It's a ridiculous notion and we shouldn't let that happen. And then the Irish border. I think the Irish border is the one that could bring everything unstuck, okay? And I think that's the real one that we've got to watch out for because it is such a sticking point. And if you look at what happened now, things have come on along since then, so I don't think it's going to be as bad. My gut feel, either one who gets in, actually, we will be okay. We'll get a deal. It might take time. It may not be the best deal, and we will have to give and take. But that's any negotiation. Will it be a win-win? My sense is, whether it be Biden or Trump, it's not going to be a win-win. We're going from a major trading bloc to an individual island, and albeit the 6th largest economy in the world. We were the 5th, we were the 1st, if you go back pre-World War II. So I think that's, we've got to look at that. So either or, it doesn't really matter who wins. Obviously, we'll have plenty of memes and plenty of fun if Trump wins and stays in. I think there's a lot of damage to be done to the world economy, the globalization of the world. And I think that's one thing that Trump will do is move people further apart, whereas Biden will probably move the countries back into what was the status quo. But at the end of the day, corporate interests are going to be put over individual citizens. And I think that's unfortunately what's happening all around the world now, and the environment second and all these sort of things. I think, yes, we slowly will move in the direction of environmental concerns and all these sort of, bits that we need to, and we need to as a society, and we know we need to, and the science is proven. But having Trump for another 4 years would be, potentially the death nail for that side of things. Because I don't think China's ready to step up into that role yet. All right. So let's leave that, put that aside, because I'm sure that's been drummed into you, everywhere on the news, everything. There's thousands of articles about it. So lockdown 2.0 won't hurt the property market because the damage has already been done. It's interesting with this. Look, this is, and to some degree I agree with this in that I don't think the second lockdown is going to be like the first. The first, there was no clarity. We actually had to stop doing things. We weren't able to, go and do viewings and do maintenance and all that sort of stuff. This time is different, okay? The market is allowed to stay open, and because the market's allowed to stay open, actually, it shouldn't be as bad. The other side of it is that we're coming into winter now, whereas it was a spring bounce before, where it should have been a busy period. This is coming into a period when it was normally slow, things would slow down. Because nobody wants to move when it's rainy and cold, At the end of the day, so there's less movement going to be happening over this period. So I don't think this lockdown is going to be as dramatic as the previous lockdown. I think what will happen in this lockdown, though, is a lot of businesses that were struggling before are going to struggle and potentially fall over. Yeah, sure, they've got the furlough schemes, and we've got the universal credit, we've got these sort of things, which are great schemes. But it is only 4 weeks, so we may get away with it. All right, it's too close to call with that side of things. But I think the one thing is, UK lockdown. Can you still move your house? Yes, you can. 100%, you can move. All right. What does a second lockdown mean? Well, for estate agents, they can do viewings, they can move ahead, they can do everything like that. So actually, it's not that bad, from our industry perspective. And at least when they come out with it that night, which was the Sunday night, late that Sunday night, they come out and said, yes, you can. So it wasn't a case of, oh no, we've got to close down, we're going to send everyone away, and we're going to go back into a full-on lockdown. it's not quite that, all right? Thank goodness, because that will keep a lot of businesses afloat. But because of the timing of it, a lot of those furloughs turned into redundancies. Now, we haven't seen those figures yet. Those figures will be coming out next month probably. And when they come out, that will give an indication of just how many jobs were lost. Now, large-scale jobs, they would have already had to report them. So, they may actually come out this month. We'll see. Look, it's as I've been saying for a while, I think during winter things will slow down, and that's going to be the economy. It will slow down. Guys, I just want to remind you, if you've got any questions, pop them into the thing, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along for anything about anything on the market. If you want opinions on anything, been doing lots and lots of research and lots of time doing that, so I can answer lots of questions with the latest, greatest data and things like that. Good. So, the next one, I guess, is, UK house price boom will collapse once buyers lose their job. Yeah, it will. That presupposes that buyers are losing their jobs, okay? And I think one of the interesting things here is don't presuppose this, because actually the unemployment rate is still not that high, okay? We still haven't seen it jump up massively because the government stimulus, okay? And this is one of the key things, and I want to just move on to this as a bit more of a concept. So if we have a look here, what this is the Federal Reserve. This is not the UK, okay? But the UK is the same sort of graph, okay? But I just want to show you, because this is the largest central bank has done this, all right? And I think the interesting thing, this is from 1960 to 2020 currently, okay? Now, if you have a look right across the side, or that side, on that side for you guys, you'll see that it basically tracks, and then it starts tracking again, and then it goes zoom. Yeah, we have gone, the Fed has gone from 4 trillion, to 5.5 trillion since coronavirus. Yeah, that is 40% more cash. So if you imagine you had $100, all of a sudden you just got given an extra $40 to go and spend and play with and do what you want. That's an incredible jump. That's unprecedented. It's never happened before. But I actually think it's the right thing to do. And I think this is not just the US that are doing this. This is a lot of economies around the world are printing money and effectively increasing the money supply. Now, that's the M1 graph. M1 is basically, it's cash, cash in our wallets, cash in our things, as well as cash in our banks effectively, okay? And that's the sort of checking accounts and those sort of things. Look, bottom line with this is that, this has jumped up dramatically, but I don't think this necessarily means we have to see massive inflation and massive things. I think this is what's required right now. If you look back into the Great Depression, they did the opposite thing, yeah? They actually raised interest rates to protect the gold standard. So even though the circumstances will change, and this is where a lot of people will say to you, oh, but we're in for a Great Depression. I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because in the Great Depression, what they did was they raised interest rates, and that totally, everything just deflated. It burst the bubble massively, and it ruined a decade. Yeah. Now, what they've done is a total opposite. It looked the same going into it, yeah, both times, but actually what's happened is the response has been the total opposite. And what have we seen? Unemployment hasn't risen that much. We've actually kept jobs, we've kept the economy, and sure, GDP dropped, but it bounced back up. And if we look at China, China's grown 5% this year, which is lower than what they would have expected. They're probably 7 to 10 they're aiming at, yeah, but it's still bloody good, okay? So, coming back to, jobs and things like that, if we can keep people in jobs, that's fantastic, because what that means now is that if people lose their jobs, and everyone loses their jobs, it takes about 2 years for the economy to get them back into jobs and get them productive again and earning. And that's what it's about, productivity, okay? Because that's where you see the results from their labor, all right? And that's a 2-year process. Now, interestingly, is that if you keep them in the job, they're already productive. As soon as you switch them back on, they're productive straight away, which means you can have this V-shape recovery. All right. Now, yes, it is costing a lot. And yes, that debt is going to be massive. Yeah, we've gone in June, we went above the 100% of GDP to debt. So debt to GDP was above 100%. It's probably around 120 now, I don't know, because at the same time we've got GDP falling, we've got debt increasing. So it's a bit of a, it's hard to look at the numbers now and go, this is what they are. And actually they haven't released the numbers fully yet. So, but the interesting thing here is if you look at that debt, that massive jump up that we've seen just there, yeah, the reality with that is that the governments are borrowing this money at near zero. In other words, they've got a long term to pay it off and it's very low interest, so they can afford to borrow a lot more. If you look at back in, say, the 90s, where you had 17% interest, sorry, 90s, I should say the 80s and 70s, where you had 17%, 12%, double-digit interest rates. If governments are borrowing at that, maybe a little bit less, okay, if you borrowed or increase your money supply by 40%, that was huge, and it would just wipe out everything. That's not happening, yeah? And interestingly, the whole economics of this is changing right now, because what we're seeing things like this happen, but then the other side is, low interest rates or near zero interest rates, to be fair, and in fact maybe even going negative, which means that they are going to charge people to have the money in the bank, yeah, which is quite an interesting thing. It doesn't mean, now don't think for an instance that means we're going to get negative interest rate on our mortgages and that. It's just not going to happen, okay? So it's an interesting time right now. I don't think, and maybe I'm an optimist, yeah, but I don't think things are as bad as they're being made out to be. There's a number of different things. For instance, technology has really taken hold, and it's really started to have a deflationary effect on prices. Yeah, across all industries. So that means that actually, even though normally we would say if you introduce so much money supply, you're going to get the sting in the tail, which is inflation, with things like this, with things like cheap interest rates and things like deflationary with the technology, you're starting to pull them back down. So yes, the debt will still be there, and yes, we're still going to get inflation potentially, but not huge. All right. So I think that's really important to understand. Guys, just remember, any questions you've got, just pump them into the thing, and I'll come through and I'm happy to answer them. But I think the overall outlook so far is a lot better than it could have been. And that's because the government is pumping this money in. Now, the reality is, and why I think they'll continue to do that, is because if all of a sudden they cut the tap off, they turn the tap off, they're left with all of this debt, and now they're still going to have the problem where all these jobs are going to be shedded, and then we're screwed. So I think the interesting thing here is I think they will keep doing this and keep supporting the economy until it naturally picks up itself. I think what's going to change now with the second lockdown and after that is, whereas the support was very broad base, now what we're going to see is the support isn't so broad base, it's more targeted. So you may see the furlough scheme is a lot less now everywhere, but then specific industries get a boost, yeah, that they're trying to support. And other industries, where they go, what, that's a dead industry, it's an old industry, it's not going to happen, then they actually falter, they're allowed to die, So you just got to make sure if you're in a job in an industry that actually is getting phased out, retrain quickly, which I think is what you'll start to see the government coming out with now, these initiatives to get people retraining into new jobs, into new careers. Because let's face it, technology, that deflationary pressure, yeah, that's going to cause a lot of automation is going to displace people. They need to be retrained, or else you end up with what's called a useless class. And what I mean by that, that's not a derogatory term. This is what Yuval Harari, in his book 21 something for the 21st century, 21 solutions for the 21st century, something like that anyway. But he talks about that, where basically automation has taken away their job and AI has taken away their job, and they're not able to be retrained to get a new job because the jobs just aren't there. And that's a real thing that is coming, okay? The question is how quickly it's coming, but it is coming, yeah? So I'll leave the economics for that now for today. Let's talk about the UK is moving away from the Thatcherite ideal of property owning democracy. Do you know what? I keep hearing this and I keep thinking, BS, bullshit. I mean, look, the reality is we've come through a period where, yes, the mortgage market review and all these sort of things have made it harder to get on the ladder. The affordability has made it harder to get on the ladder. But actually, you can still buy a house with 5% deposit. Yeah. Yes, you might only be buying 60% of it or 70% of it or whatever you can, muster up. But the reality is the option is still there to buy. You just may not be able to buy where you rent right now. Yeah. And I think if we start getting that concept, I think we can still be a nation of homeowners. Yeah. Yes, the percentages drop, but yes, we've had austerity for 10 years. We've had Brexit for the last 3 of that. We've had coronavirus for the last 1, or last 4 of that, last 3 and then 4. So, we've had all these things layering on top of each other, which has kept the market down. Plus, we've had corporate interests with, controlling the political will to say, actually, we don't want small landlords. We only want big corporates owning property. Yeah. And so a lot of these schemes are going to this rent to buy. Okay. And that's, that is moving forward, and that's what's actually happening. Yeah. So what does this mean? Are we going to become a European style nation of renters? There certainly will be people like that. Yeah. There'll be people who, unfortunately, are not, they don't own capital appreciating assets. And, look, I'm a property guy. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that property is the only solution. Property, shares, businesses, those are the people who have capital appreciating assets. Okay. And effectively they will almost, be in what I call the landlord class. Yeah. And then if you like, the renter class will be underneath that. And unfortunately, the middle class is getting squeezed down for the most part. What you need to do is make sure that you're, getting up into the landlord class and owning capital appreciating assets. Whether that is property, it probably will be property as a portion of it. It might be shares, it might be businesses, whatever works for you. It might be a mix. It's probably going to be more of a mix, a blend. Yeah. But do I think we're going to become a nation of renters? No, I don't. I think there is still the urge, the feeling, the right, an Englishman's home in his castle, just as an Aussie's home is his castle. Your castle is not, yeah. So there's still a need for that. And I don't see that changing. Just because, yes, affordability has been an issue, just because, yes, wages have been stagnant for a large degree, okay? Just because certain areas haven't been growing because there's a move into the cities. I mean, we're now saying that everything's moving out of the cities, but is that the case? Well, let's have a look at that. UK country house prices hit 4-year high in race for space. Shift from working from home drives demand among wealthy buyers for properties in rural areas. Well, let's face it, guys, most of these stories have one word in it: wealthy owners or wealthy investors or wealthy, I mean, at the end of the day, most of the people, if you're not wealthy and you don't fit that bill, then the likelihood is you're not really getting the choice to move out. Now, yeah, you may. And it may be that people move back to where they are. But then, the problem is in the cities is where the jobs are, and the jobs are still, you'll still be going to work for a few days. It's likely to be, a blend, work from home and work from office. Yeah. So you still will too. But yes, I think, and I've said this for a while, and actually it was funny because I was on Gary V's the other day on his channel, and there was a whole discussion about this where he was talking about how, people are moving out of the city and doing this blended work. And I 100% agree with that, and we're commenting about that. But look, bottom line, what's going to happen? And yes, people are moving out of the cities, yeah, or out of the suburbs, in the commuter town, in the central areas, because they realise they're going to be working in more of a blend. So they'll move out where they can get a more expensive place. A cheaper place, but more space. All right. So that is happening, but that doesn't mean that there's not people moving into the cities, because actually what will happen is, as far as those people go, it just might mean that, yeah, those cities are subdued for a little while. But actually, I don't think so. I think there's so much pent up demand for those areas that they're still going to grow. Yeah. So I think that's really, really interesting and really thing. Do I think the race for space is actually happening? Yeah, I do. I think people are starting to rationalize their future, which is a great thing. We have been so focused as a society on the financial side, but not the social side. And I think we're going to become more socially minded now. And I would hope that's what happens with us. because if we do, then I think this whole automation and AI and this sort of thing won't be so bad. We'll be able to capture more lifestyle. All right. Now, yes, there's things that can do some support that and that, but I think this is it's going to take some time, but it will happen sooner than we think. I think, and it's to a degree, it's already happening, and coronavirus has certainly sped that up. So property funds are dead, and look, guys, do I believe property funds are dead? This says UK unfrozen property funds see more than 300 million in October outflows. Basically, what they're talking about is property funds, which is where you pay money into a pension, and then that pension invests into a property fund that buys property and works it that way. The question is, are these things dead? Well, do you know what? I put that headline there, and I'll be using that headline for a little while now. Why? Because it seems every change that happens to buy-to-let, people say, oh, buy-to-let's dead. Well, I've been hearing this for 20 years. In fact, I've been hearing this back in Australia. I've been hearing this, investment property's dead. It's the same headline. It's just headline grabbing. The reality is property funds are here. They're here to stay. They're actually going to get even bigger because with build to rent and things like that, these sort of schemes. They've got 300 million, but actually, if you look at the billions that is invested, 300 million is like, not even worth even worrying about. So, I think this is where headlines can be deceiving. Property funds aren't dead. Buy-to-let isn't dead. Yes, okay, right now, lots of things are struggling to make the returns they were. But if you look at over the long period of time, over my whole career, we've gone from where you could earn 15%, 10 to 15%, and that was kind of the accepted norm, down to sort of where you've got, 5 to 8%, down to where now you sort of could be looking at 3 to 5% is what you'd be expecting, and that, if that's the long-term trend, then we're heading to where actually, virtually, our growth will be smaller, and it's been squeezed. It's interesting, but if you look at the way back, I showed you the money supply thing, and it had 9 different. If you look since 1960, there's been 9 recessions. Those 9 recessions happen on average every 6.6 years, which is interesting because that means recessions are happening more often, but they're not as bad. Now, the thing with a recession, and what I've found being through 3 of them now, is that they're really bad if you lose your job, if your business falls over, if you do that. They're inconvenient for most other people, but then some people boom in a recession. So, it's not a case where these recessions are the worst thing on the market. Actually, we talk about zigzag, we talk about contrarian theory, we talk about, when everyone's doing this, you do this. So you've got to find the opportunity now. And I think that's one of the key things, is where are the opportunities now? And if you've got the, if you've got the education, if you've got the experience and you've got the emotions in check, you can really make some money now because of the opportunities that are there. And, we're seeing them all the time now. It doesn't mean that you're seeing huge price drops. We're not seeing huge price drops. We're seeing down values and things like that here and there and all that around the place. But that's more not because there's been necessarily a down value. It's because, someone's been instructed to down value everything and they're just playing that game. It's more of a cover your ass, CYA than an actual reality of what's happened in the market. The market's gone up about 5 to 7%. We'll see what happens, this month, next month, because, October was a bit of a, we weren't expecting it to continue to grow, and it has continued to grow. And potentially, well, we'll see what happens with November now with the lockdown. But yeah. So guys, that's it for me today. I will, if you're interested in getting involved, we've got the autumn webinar series. And so next week we're on, so Tuesday, 5 p.m. and every Tuesday for the next 4 weeks. We've also got the backlog of ones that we've done, the first 3. But next week is the impossible property dream, 100 properties or just 4 to freedom. And what we're going to be talking about is how you can become financially independent with just 4 properties and how that is possible. And I'm going to do the maths and work out the maths on that and see if it is still viable. I wrote a book back in 2008, and actually in the turn of the century at 2000, I actually started with this plan. Back then it was called the 3+1 strategy, but we renamed the book 3+1 plan. And so that's been 12 years now. And is it still applicable today as it was back then? And can you do it? You know, I think the mistake a lot of people make is they think that they need 100 properties, but we'll be discussing why 100 properties not needed. You know, 4 is enough and how to get to that 4. Okay, so I think that's really interesting. If you're interested in that, go to gladfish.com/webinars. Okay, and sign up to the webinar there. And yeah, basically, or there's a link in the description of this video. Okay, and even if you're not, you can sign up to it and watch the replay at any stage. So guys, that's, has anyone got any questions? We've been really light on questions today. So I'm surprised normally we have a few more questions. But look guys, that's it for me today. And I want to thank you all for coming. Be sure to subscribe and press the like button. And if you've got any questions, you can send them through to webinars@gladfish.com. And I'll be happy to record a video in response or include it in my weekly webinar, weekly live stream, I should say. But anyway, guys, have a fantastic day. And yeah, don't forget, live with passion, and we'll see you real soon. Bye.